Paul Hawksby and Andy Jacobs here on talkSPORT. Very sad news breaking in the last few moments. Robin's rejoined us.
Yeah, we understand that the former England and Aston Villa manager Graham Taylor has died at the age of 72. That news coming to us just a few minutes ago, that the former England and Aston Villa manager Graham Taylor has passed away at the age of 72.
Thanks very much, Robin.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, it's very sad news.
It certainly is. He's no age.
Decent man, no question.
You often still saw him around. He was still broadcasting, and he was still around Watford a lot, wasn't he? So that is a shock.
David, our producer, who's a big Watford fan, says, we'd be nothing without him.
Absolutely. We'll bring you more reaction to that throughout the show. Paul Hawksby, Andy Jacobs here on talkSPORT. Sad news in the last half hour. If you're just joining us, that Graham Taylor, the former England, Watford and Aston Villa manager, has died aged 72.
So many lovely tributes, which is always a measure of a man.
Joining us now is his assistant when he was in the England job. Laurie McMenemy joins us. Good afternoon, Laurie.
Hi, Paul, Andy. Sad day.
Indeed.
Sad,
as I said, you always kind of... It seems to have come out of nowhere, this, Laurie. I don't know if you've been in touch with Graham recently.
Well, no, I'm not the sort... I think a lot of us are not the sort that do that, keep ringing each other, but we're always there if needed,
Sure.
And I hadn't spoken to him for quite a while. I think Christmas cards probably, and that's it. But I think he had a bit of an accident, didn't he, over a year or so ago when he fell down some stairs or whatever. Whether that's had anything to do with it, I wouldn't know. But whatever, it is so sad because 72 is no age, is it?
Absolutely.
No, it isn't. A decent man, and what comes across is his real love for football.
Well, he was a decent man, and I think that, like a lot of football people, he'll be remembered for the possible failure rather than the successes, and it's wrong. He did what I think all managers should do if they get a chance, cut that level. He was a good, solid bloke. After playing, he was managing in Lincolnshire and just got on with it, learned the ups and downs of it all then. And then, of course, when he went to Watford, I mean, his record at Watford's incredible. I think he took them up 4 divisions, didn't he? And all the way, to the top in a matter of only 5 years. And then finished second top, which for a club like Watford was incredible, because that means you've got, I don't know who was top that year, but you've probably got like the Man United's, Arsenal's, Chelsea's, Liverpool's all beneath them. And also, and I remember it well because I was at the cup final and bumped into his chairman who was shedding a tear at the end. It was at Wembley in 1984. When so he's took them all the way the second top and the Wembley final, and when he got the England job, he was right for it and ready for it, and I would then always give him credit for giving me the opportunity to go with England. I looked after the under-21s and what we had in those days, a B team, which I still think would be useful, but that's another story, and you will remember better than anyone how he was stitched up with the games against Holland. I think the one at Wembley, you can blame the players, not the manager. But the one in Holland, you can only blame Mr. Koeman and the referee. When David Platt was pulled down in the penalty area and Ronald put the ball outside the box, they let him take a free kick. Then it was charged down, went to the other end, they got a free kick. Mr. Koeman came up, who shouldn't have been there, he should have been off the pitch, took the free kick, hit the wall. Referee said, take it again, move the wall back, and Mr. Koeman scored. And Graham famously said to the linesman, tell your friend the referee, he's just cost me my job. And he'll be remembered for things like that. And but he was a good, solid football man, but also, most important, a good family man and a nice man in general, and he would help people. And it's a very, very sad day.
You were around him when all the pressure was on him and the press were on his case when it was going wrong with England. I mean, how did he cope with that, Laurie? You were close to that.
Well, we used to, the under-21s or the Bs, always abroad, about 50 mile away or something, and then I would join up with them on the morning of the big game. And I made a habit of always going into his room, maybe an hour before we were due to leave to go to the ground or whatever, and just sit, because no matter who you are in football, big games coming up, and you will be getting a bit uptight, a few nerves coming in, and that. And I think it was always good to have somebody to bounce off that knew the feeling, and that's what we did. And I think he handled it very well. He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. He actually brought in a psychologist at one stage, which was a bit of a joke with some of the players. But it's now tell me a club that hasn't got at least one of them around.
Sure.
But I mean, I remember it was quite funny because he said to the players, "Well, this is this gentleman, and if you don't want to talk to him, just say no thanks. But otherwise, he'll talk to you on a one-on-one." And I remember we were getting ready, putting the boots on at Bisham Abbey, and Stuart Pearce nudged me and he said, "Have a look." And off was the psychologist with Paul Gascoigne, going for a walk around. And he says, when he comes back, he says, he'll need a bloody psychologist.
Did he ever regret, Laurie, did he ever regret, you think?
I remember.
Yeah, because of the stick that he took when he was England manager. I mean, he obviously must have been immensely proud to have got the job, so humble beginnings as a player at Grimsby and Lincoln. Do you think he ever regretted it? That he
No,
took that job
I don't think you'll ever regret taking the top job. I think you would regret the stick that he got off certain areas in the media. But you see, I think when things aren't going well, they look and say, well, he never played for England. You know, he never did that. You don't have to play at that level to be a good manager. Good management is about getting the best out of the players you've got. Some of the best players ever, with due respect, never made it as a manager. They tried, but they didn't make it. The fact that Graham had done all those years of coming up the ladder in every division, don't forget he'd managed in every division, that gave him the right CV to take the England team, and he was so proud of it. He really, really was. I mean, it was a fantastic thing for him. And I just think he was very, very unlucky not to qualify. If he'd qualified for the World Cup, Lord knows what might have happened after that. But when he didn't, I think hands up, okay, we've got to go, and that's how it happened.
Sure. The media gave him a hard time, but to a man, they're all tweeting what a decent bloke he was and how great he was to deal with, and he stayed involved in the game, which is a nice thing because not everybody does, and regular broadcasts and
that's right. Yeah, you put on the radio. Yeah, well, that's when your experience comes out, when you're seeing things on a pitch from a different angle, and I think that's when you get the balance. You get a good commentator and who. And he was like a commentator would enjoy having someone like him simply because he'd been there and done it at every level, you know.
Laurie, appreciate you joining us.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. We'll catch up with you soon.
All right, cheers, lads. Thanks.
Laurie McMenemy there. And it's a fascinating insight into what was going on, the dynamic between the press. I'm very pleased to say Rob Shepherd, the journalist in question, joins us now. Good afternoon, Rob.
Good afternoon.
It's an amazing bit of TV. I'm sure you've watched it back subsequently. How do you look at it now when you watch it back?
Well, first, when I say good afternoon, it's not a particularly good one, is it? I am shocked and saddened by Graham's untimely death. When I look back at that, it was a moment in time. It was a highly charged press conference. None of us knew at the time it was being recorded. It was the kind of banter that happened really before the new age really of 24-hour rolling media, cameras everywhere, and it was a kind of it was a question that I asked that Graham responded to, and then subsequently it became a dramatic moment of a very interesting documentary. Often I think it's Football Spinal Tap, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating documentary. And what's interesting as well is there's been, although you had this relationship with him, and it was the relationship with him, you and the rest of the press, how universal the reaction has been from football writers about what a decent bloke he was and how great he was to deal with.
Here, I have to be very clear. I mean, yes, there was sort of sabre rattling in that particular incident. But I always got on very well with Graham prior to that, and I have to tell you subsequently, and I must make this very clear, a few years ago when I had a very, very difficult personal problem in my life, Graham Taylor was the first person to write to me in a handwritten fountain pen letter to give me his backing, and it was very emotional, and that was the mark of the man. He took, a lot of stick, particularly at the time. There was a tabloid war that between the Sun and the Mirror that he fell into. I was working for the Day newspaper at the time, I have to say. But Graham really dealt with it quite well overall. What I would say is this. If there was a mistake he made as England manager, he should have probably stuck to his principles rather than how he had been successful at Watford and Aston Villa before he got the England job and Lincoln at the start, rather than wanting to satisfy what certain pundits and media wanted and indeed certain England players at the time.
With that World Cup qualifying group, and we were talking about this earlier on with Laurie McMenamin, it was a bit of a hostage to fortune. I mean, the Norway were lucky to get back into a game. We all know what happened in the game against Holland, where the referee and the officials let him down. There were key moments in that run, and it could have been also different for him.
I agree. I mean, there was a scientist. I mean, people talk about statistics these days, but a German scientist recently, I read a report, said that 80% or 85% of football is luck. Well, I'm not entirely sure about that, but things change. Things change, moments change. The ball goes in off the inside of the post, so it goes the other side. Norway, I would say, was a tactical mistake by Graham, having come from Poland through 1-1. He could have kept the momentum going, but he changed the system, and that was the problem going into the Holland game. But you're quite right. I mean, it'd be interesting to have Ronald Koeman's thoughts on this. I mean, let's not forget that David Platt was going through on goal. Was it a penalty? No. Was it a sending off? What it should have been, and who knows how things might have changed. And then, of course, he scores a free kick. He was unlucky with injuries in terms of Alan Shearer was out for most of that period. Gascoigne, was in and out because of injury. Certain things conspired against Graham Taylor. Of that, there is no question. There is no doubt.
And of course, there's the famous moment where he substituted Gary Lineker and brought on Alan Smith, and that also received a lot of criticism for that.
The Euros, yes, that's right. He did. I mean, when you look at the relationship with the press, Rob, when you're in that room, I mean, was there, as you said, he was in the middle of a kind of a circulation war that was going on between two big tabloids. Was there sympathy for him? Was there feeling of saying, this may be going a little bit too far?
Well, I mean, I suppose the one that people talk about is Swedes 2, Turnips 1, after England lost to Sweden in the European one, if you recall, and then England lost. And, that was a bit of fun. I think the Mirror then tried to, when we lost 2-0, say we, England, that's how we felt. Everybody wants to write a successful England story. I have to tell you, despite what a lot of people think, I covered the 1990 World Cup, and there was nothing greater than covering England, getting to the semi-final, and that's the best story you can ever write. I wish I'd been around in '66 to write England for West Germany too. There wasn't. He was a decent man. I think sometimes, as I said previously, I think he tried to satisfy too many people, and perhaps there was all the talk about Route 1 and long ball. Well, okay, Jack Charlton didn't bother Jack Charlton when Republic of Ireland sort of punched above their weight. It was. When you look back, it did seem crazy to take Gary Lineker off in that game against Sweden, your top goal scorer of all time, when you need to score a goal. It didn't make sense. And indeed, Alan Shearer was on the bench at the time, and if he was going to put a young Alan Shearer on, it might have done. But he put Alan Smith on, and Alan was a very good player, but it wasn't exactly a goal poacher in the sort of the sense that Lineker or Shearer became. So that was a strange decision. But he had a fantastic club career. It didn't go so well for him with England. That you point out, I mean, that game in Holland, which I was worried, and that was one of the funny things. And he told me to, in that interview that you mentioned earlier on, to, brighten up and smile. And it didn't work out that way. And I have to tell you also, it was harder to qualify for tournaments then than it seems to be now. One less team. I mean, the game that people forget really is the home game to Norway when England were winning 1-0, I think, and it was at Leonardson who eventually went to Wimbledon and scored a scorcher out of the blue. And let's not forget 2-0 up against Holland, in control at Wembley, and then Gascoigne gets smacked in the elbowed in the face. They get a penalty, and it becomes 2-2. And on these moments, football changes, and Graham Taylor should always be a very good manager and, moreover, a very, very decent football man.
Thanks, Rob.
Appreciate your time, Rob. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Rob Shepherd there.